Returning to our top story, the military in Myanmar has extended the state of emergency in the country by another 6 months. The move puts in doubt whether polls promised in August can take place as planned.
The extension comes on the second anniversary of the coup that ousted the democratically elected government led by Aung San Suu Kyi. Since then, Myanmar has been in turmoil, with more than 3,000 killed and thousands more detained as the military cracks down on dissent to consolidate its power.
And for more, let's speak with Tom Andrews. He's United Nations Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in Myanmar, and he joins us this morning from Fairfax, Virginia. Tom, it's been 2 years since the military coup, and in a report you released yesterday, you say 1.1 million people have been displaced in that time. Give us a sense of what that means in terms of human rights.
It's a catastrophe, Steve, in terms of human rights. That 1.1 million people have been displaced because entire villages have been attacked and destroyed. Over 38,000 homes have been destroyed. To put it in perspective, it's projected in 2023 that 17.6 million people in Myanmar, that's about little less than a third of the entire population, is going to be in need of humanitarian aid this year. Contrast that with the year before the coup, a total of 1 million people were in need of humanitarian aid. To make it worse, the junta is destroying access for humanitarian aid convoys to get to people in desperate need. They're attacking clinics. They're attacking IDP centers. I spoke to a man who lost his 2 daughters, ages 12 and 15. His village had been destroyed. His home had been destroyed. He took his family to what he thought was safety in an IDP center. And both of his girls were killed in their sleep because a bomb was dropped by the junta military on an IDP center. So it is bad, but worse than that, it is horrific as the junta seizes the pain and tries to increase its intensity on the people of Myanmar through these horrific attacks.
Tom, the military government has now announced an extension of the state of emergency, which means the election they claimed would be held in August likely delayed. Should we be concerned that the goalposts keep moving, or is this a positive development in a way, given many say the election would be a sham anyway?
Well, clearly the election was going to be a sham. I mean, you cannot have a free and fair election when you arrest, detain, torture, and execute the opposition, when you arrest journalists for doing their job. I've spoken with journalists who were tortured in detention. You can't have a free and fair election when it is illegal to criticize the junta. So anyone and everyone who understands the fundamentals of democracy know that having an election under these conditions is a sham and a fraud, and we are encouraging those countries around the world, including in the region, to reject it as such. Now, the state of emergency, I think, reflects the decline in the ability of the military junta to control the country. You said at the top of your broadcast, they're controlling fewer and fewer areas of the country. And so I think that is driving this state of emergency. And it is showing that the opposition movement, which is strong, which is vibrant, we saw the silent strike yesterday, very successful across the country. We've seen the proliferation of the People's Defense Forces and the independent resistance organizations, their strength, growing strength, and then citizen resistance, withdrawing their taxes, not buying any products associated with the junta. There is a massive citizen movement against this junta. And I think if we as an international community can support them, stand with them by denying recognition of a sham election, but also to deny them the resources that they need to replenish their stocks of weapons, then I think together we can end this nightmare before more and more people are killed.
Now, you've said that a coordinated international response to the crisis is imperative, like what we are seeing with Ukraine, for example. But who's best placed to lead that response? Would that fall to ASEAN?
I think ASEAN will play a very, very critical role. And we know that countries like Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, the Philippines, have been critical of the junta. They've reduced their diplomatic relations and contacts with the junta. We know that the junta has disrespected ASEAN in its efforts to try to broker some kind of an accord to end the violence. The 5-point consensus of ASEAN, the first point of that, which was to end all the violence. Min Aung Hlaing, the head of the military junta, agreed to that. But the ink was barely dry on the document that he agreed to when he announced that he only recognized the 5-point consensus as what he termed suggestions that he will consider following once he subdued his opponents. So this is the kind of junta that we're talking about, that disrespects international law, that is violating human rights, committing war crimes and crimes against humanity systematically, and disrespecting its neighbors in ASEAN. So I'm confident that ASEAN will be continuing to step forward, particularly those members of ASEAN that have been critical, and that with the world as a united whole, a coordinated, very focused, very strategic approach to denying the junta the means to carry out these atrocities will follow. The sooner, I hope, that will come, certainly the better it will be for the people of Myanmar.
Tom, you've said you believe the playbook for Myanmar should be the one being used in Ukraine. What would that look like? Are you suggesting military aid to Myanmar? Would that help?
Well, let me be perfectly frank. There are many, many people in the People's Defense Forces that would say enthusiastically yes to that question. If they could have some weapons that could take some of those gunships that are opening fire on schools and villages and clinics, they would use them. But what we're talking about, what I'm recommending, is that there be a coordinated effort that, much as the international community has formed a coalition to support Ukraine, a similar effort would be made with respect to Myanmar. And that would deny the junta the means to get access to these weapons. There is a movement afoot. Canada, the UK just announced yesterday that they are supporting a halt, a boycott of aviation fuel to the country so that they could make it more and more difficult for the junta to fly those planes. There's an effort to stop the resources that they're using to produce weapons and purchase weapons from getting into the country. So what I'm suggesting, is that there be that kind of a unified effort with ASEAN countries and around the world to stop these weapons getting into the hands of the junta and closing off their opportunities for using them to continue to commit these war crimes and crimes against humanity.
And you've spoken in detail about what the international community and countries outside of Myanmar can do. We understand you've also had contact with the National Unity Government within Myanmar. What is their strategy at this point in terms of dealing with the regime?
Well, their strategy is pretty straightforward. They're doing everything that they can to deal with this catastrophe. They're working to support clinics, to get humanitarian aid in over borders. They're working with a network of NGOs, CSOs that are providing humanitarian aid underground, as it were, around the efforts of the junta to stop it. So they are making heroic efforts to support the people of Myanmar. Meanwhile, in the international community, they're calling for stronger support, stronger engagement with them, recognition as the national unity government. And when you look at this, the criteria that is used for recognizing governments, even the criteria that the junta itself used for its own legitimacy, by all of these standards, the junta is an illegitimate regime. But the national unity government, the leadership of which reflects the will of the people through their the 2020 election, in which they won overwhelmingly the majority of seats in the parliament, they have the legitimate claim to being the true representatives of the people of Myanmar. So because of this, I think it's important for the international community to engage with them, to recognize them, and to work hand in glove with them so that together we can join the people of Myanmar in stopping this catastrophe.
Tom, we're running out of time on the clock, but I want your thoughts on the Indonesian president. He says he's going to send a top general to meet with Myanmar military chiefs and offer lessons on how Indonesia transitioned to a successful democracy. What do you think of this strategy?
Well, there are important models, certainly around the world, of countries transforming themselves from a military dictatorship into a democracy. I was in Seoul and Gwangju in the Republic of Korea a few months ago, and certainly there's a very important story that they have to tell about how, as a people, they overcame a military dictatorship in the 1980s. I think all these lessons can be brought to bear, and I think that. But what I think is really important is that there be leverage behind any negotiations or discussions involving the junta. They need to know that the international community is serious, that we're going to stop their means of continuing this slaughter. We're going to hold them accountable, and that what they're doing is unsustainable. I think if we bring that kind of leverage and clarity into any discussions, then and only then, I believe those discussions will be successful.
Tom, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you, as always, for your insight and perspective. Tom Andrews, United Nations Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in Myanmar.